The Texas Midcoast is home to so many species of wildlife. Crabs, oysters, whooping cranes, sea turtles. This is their nursery. This is where they grow up. The estuary and the bay systems is essential to the health of these species.
But these waters are facing numerous challenges. The list includes lack of freshwater inflows, marine debris, abandoned crab traps, plastics and litter. All of these have a negative impact on wildlife habitat and water quality.
A lot of people depend on what's in these waters to make a living. From shrimpers, crabbers, recreational fishing, birding, the ecological importance of the estuary system is so rich here, and there's certain parts of this bay system that aren't doing so great. It's up to us to take care of it so that future generations and the economy can continue to thrive.
The Texas Midcoast is a large area, and these are big issues that we're trying to address. This effort takes a group of passionate volunteers and organizations to make it work. And that is what the San Antonio Bay Partnership is all about. The Texas Midcoast region is 100 miles on the Texas Midcoast and includes 3 bay systems. The bay systems are Matagorda Bay, San Antonio Bay, and Aransas Bay.
San Antonio Bay Partnership uses a holistic approach to improve habitat, to protect wildlife, and to improve water security.
When there's drought, the flows into San Antonio Bay are reduced, sometimes significantly. Dams and reservoirs, more and more use by industries is making it difficult to maintain those flow regimes. To address this issue, we purchase fresh water. This supports the needs of nature, the community, and the regional economy that depends on this bay system.
The problems we're trying to address are big, and we've known from the beginning that we needed lots of help. You have to be able to scale what you're doing, and that's why our partners in the Midcoast community are so important to achieving our mission. We can't do it without them.
Our volunteers literally are our workforce. More than 300 volunteers come out every year. They've removed hundreds of abandoned crab traps, tons of trash, and they've rescued over 400 sea turtles.
That community outreach and education is critical to all of our programs. This region needs all hands on deck, all generations, all industries to protect and steward the land, the wildlife, and the water that make this Midcoast region so special.
We want people to learn because, as Jacques Cousteau said, we only protect what we love, and we only love what we understand. That's why getting the community involved is so important.
When this program got started, our main goal was to protect the resources of the bay. Being out on the bay waters is my peace place. That certainly drives my desire to protect these resources and to make them available for future generations.
This region brings together a diverse group of community members that are focused on pieces of the environment that matter, and that's special. With the changing world, it's not permanent unless we take care of it and protect it.
After 14 years, it's amazing what we've been able to accomplish with the help of the community and our volunteers. But we really feel like there's much more to do. San Antonio Bay Partnership uses the conservation model that brings everybody together, and that scales.
Howdy. Welcome back. I'm Karina Araujo, Director of Marketing at Texan by Nature. After 2 incredible panels, I'm excited to present the last panel of the day, Generating Change. don't forget that you can ask questions and engage in the dialogue via our YouTube stream. Jack Welch once said, "Change before you have to." Change before you have to. What does this mean to you? And why are we ending the day focused on generating change? Change before you have to. To Texan by nature, this means don't wait for regulation, don't wait for chaos, don't wait for system failure. Change before you have to. Change while you can plan, learn, and evolve towards the most positive outcomes. Change is both inevitable and critical to the future. And change is also something that we can guide towards progress and positive impact. This panel will explore drivers of change that are working. As Texan by Nature matches projects to funding through the Texas Water Action Collaborative and focuses on evaluating total value of efforts through the return on conservation analysis, we see commonalities marking projects and programs that are generating the greatest positive change. Strong feedback loops, standard data, clear communication, and invested leaders are all working components of systems harnessing change. These provide building blocks to change before we have to. This panel explores change generation through collaboration, conservation prioritization, result measurement, new technologies, and evolving markets. We encourage you to think about how these apply to your efforts, while also thinking about what processes, products, or programs should be reviewed in your own organization. Which of these are ready for change? Which should be updated to better realize full system value? And how can you take learnings from this panel home to generate positive change? Today, you'll hear from Allan Berger, Chairman of the Board, San Antonio Bay Partnership, Kevin Lang, CEO of Agerpoint, and Preston Smith, Managing Partner of Wildwood. Similar to previous panels, you'll hear each presentation in succession, and we'll join the speakers live for Q&A after all presentations are done. For virtual attendees, you can submit your questions via the YouTube channel. So please join me in thanking these presenters. Allan?
Good afternoon. It's an honor to be here today, so thank you so much for inviting me. As the slide says, I am the chairman of the San Antonio Bay Partnership, and as such, I represent the volunteers who make the partnership go. And I have another title. I am the Chief Bay Rat, and I'll explain that to you shortly. Our mission is to protect San Antonio Bay, both for the benefit of both the bay and its human uses. We strive to create a community for the bay. This important estuary lies in Calhoun County, in the middle of the mid-coast, between Matagorda and Aransas Bays. The counties in this area are mostly rural. Calhoun County has a population of about 20,000 people. These bays support active commercial and recreational activities. Their health is essential to the economic well-being of the region. On the conservation side, the Aransas Refuge is the winter home of the endangered whooping crane. The mid-coast is critical to its recovery, continued recovery. The bays are also important to endangered sea turtles. I grew up in Port O'Connor, and I've seen the changes occurring on the mid-coast. My wife, Bridget, agreed to let me retire there so that I could feed my fishing habit. My connection to the bay is deep and personal. The video you just watched described the pressures to the bay. The scientists at the Hart Research Institute at Texas A&M Corpus Christi developed an ecosystem report card for each bay system in the state. This science-based effort provides a snapshot of the current conditions and highlights missing information necessary to make critical decisions. Findings from the report card help us prioritize conservation and restoration efforts. Hart graded both San Antonio and Matagorda bays as vulnerable, noting degradation of oyster reefs, inadequate data on the impacts of plastic pollution, and the need for frameworks for focused freshwater inflows. The critical time for taking action to ensure the long-term health of these bays is now, or we risk losing them. Our role in this underserved region is to be an agent for that action. Our programs provide hands-on opportunities to clean up the bay, to protect turtles, and to restore habitats. Volunteers are essential to accomplishing these tasks, and they had work hour totals of over 2,900 hours. That's equivalent to about 500 volunteer days for our last events. We further believe environmental education is key to the future, and we work to expand its reach with our funding. Last year, nearly 5,600 students participated. As a volunteer-managed organization, we work with our partners that are listed there to leverage our collective assets and to advocate for common goals. Our first program coordinated volunteers for Parks and Wildlife's Abandoned Crab Trap Removal Program. Abandoned traps are unsightly litter and navigation hazards. Worse, they continue to entrap crabs and fish. Critters go in, they die, and that baits more critters. For 10 days each February, the bays are closed to crabbing. All traps remaining in the bay are assumed to be derelict, and we are to remove them. This year, we removed 900 traps. We record their location, amongst other things, and this data drives our strategies to reduce trap dereliction rates. It is encouraging to see that the number of traps removed each year is declining, while our searches are more comprehensive. Removing the traps is hard, dirty work. But rescuing the entrapped critters provides the satisfaction. If the trap is in the water, it frequently contains crabs. And we find other things. In the upper right, you'll see an entrapped redfish. It's a popular recreational target. Below that, a diamondback terrapin, a threatened estuarine turtle, and unexpectedly, a clapper rail that Bridget found and released from a trap on shore. So getting the traps out of the water is important, and that's what our volunteers do. Plastic pollution in the bays is also a problem, both aesthetically and environmentally. We just completed our 5th annual bay cleanup in September. We pick up what we can, but we have over 150 miles of shoreline, and most requiring a boat to access, so it's impossible to pick it all up. So we collect data on what we pick up to educate bay users on what they can do to reduce litter. This data is from 5 years of cleanup. In the big middle there are 65,000 items that we've picked up. I believe that much of the trash that we pick up is blowing off bays that are using the bay, blowing off boats that are using the bay. We focus on the most preventable, for example, drink bottles. We picked up 17,416 to be precise. Plastic bags, 4,600. Plastic cups, 2,300. Typically, marine litter is reported in tons. We pick up about 3 tons a year. But I think it's more informative to use these metrics. They're more specific, but they get us closer to the root problem. We use this data to ask bay users to change their behaviors, to secure the trash on their boats. Better, reduce the plastics on your boat so it can't blow off. and as importantly, leave the bay cleaner than you find it. We can't pick it all up, so we have to stop littering. The last program I want to mention is our newest. The Mid-Coast Sea Turtle Rescue was formed after Winter Storm Uri, when 500 dead turtles were found in mid-coast bays. When bay water temperatures drop below 50 degrees, the cold-blooded turtles become lethargic and lose their ability to swim. They float on the surface and are windblown to the shoreline where they can freeze or be predated. Bridget worked with Parks and Wildlife Coastal Fisheries to organize a volunteer rescue effort like that in Galveston Bay and South Padres Laguna Madre. Over 80 volunteers have signed up, both for rescue boats and for ground transport to a rehab facility in Port Aransas. We have responded to 4 cold stunning events and delivered over 400 turtles. This too is hard but satisfying work. Our key partner in environmental education is the Texas Floating Classroom, a nonprofit from Aransas Pass. Their floating classroom, Archimedes, visits the Mid-Coast each year, usually in October, to take students out for a hands-on educational experience. They pull a small trawl and a plankton seine for onboard observation. During the last school year, the Archimedes made 64 trips in the Mid-Coast for 1,300 students. Of note is that over a quarter of those students had never been on a boat despite living near the bay. For those students who can't come to the bay, the program has a touch tank that they take to the classroom. The traveling bay visited 34 schools and 4,300 students in the San Antonio and Guadalupe River watersheds. I think the traveling bay is of particular import. It connects the river kids to the bay, and I think that's important for all of us to remember. Our contribution to this program is a significant portion of the floating classroom's overall budget for the Mid-Coast. Unfortunately, we usually run out of money before we run out of students. The partnership has been working as a volunteer-driven organization for nearly 15 years, and we're very proud of what we've accomplished. Most people care about their bay. They want to see it protected. As individuals, making a difference is difficult, and together we can do so much more. Note our Bay Rat logo shown on the slide. Growing up in Port O'Connor in the 60s, this term described those who, like me, couldn't get enough of the water. Our logos are acronyms that include action verbs: removing abandoned traps, removing awful trash, and even rescuing awesome turtles. Bay rats want to take action to protect the bay, and that is what makes the partnership go. Important to our success with volunteers is the approach we've taken. There's 5 steps. They're not rocket science. First, we identify a meaningful and satisfying task. Releasing entrapped critters or rescuing turtles certainly qualifies. Next, we develop detailed plans for the task. No volunteer wants to stand around. We also reward them with useful swag, like a metal water bottle to replace the plastic bottles on their boats. Then we team build by celebrating both the effort and the success and the result. And finally, we measure and report the results directly to the volunteers and to the public as they are in relatable manners. Our volunteers are essential to our work, and we could not do it without them. They are the core Bay community. As our programs have grown, it's become clear to me that directing these programs with volunteer management is limiting. We need improvements and expansions that can only be accomplished with full-time staff. We continue to ask Bay users to become more involved, to become official Bay rats by participating in one of our programs. We need their help to expand our programs. Our current volunteer community is not near the tipping point necessary to drive the change we need. It must be bigger and broader. There are more bay users than there are bay rats. Other conservation organizations and the governmental agencies are also working hard, but that's not enough. It's the community's bay, and it's the community's problem, and we need the users to be more involved, more individuals, more businesses, and more industry. Further, there are significant opportunities for restoration work that is necessary to improve the resilience of the bays given our pressures. This involves a significant step up in our organizational capability. Oyster reefs need to be rebuilt, bird rookeries need expansion, freshwater inflows during drought need supplementing. We need full-time staff to achieve these goals, and we need funding for that staff. Thank you for your time today, and I look forward to meeting you on the water. You too can become a bay rat.
Hey, good afternoon. Great stuff, Allan. Look forward to a fishing trip to the bay at some point in the future. Really inspiring. I'm Kevin Lang. I'm the CEO of Agerpoint. I first want to thank Joni and the Texan by Nature team, the fantastic team, for bringing us all together and hearing so many inspiring stories today, especially the ones that are focused on cultivating our youth and educating them and getting them to love nature. I know we're all in this room. I'm confident we're going to do really great things to protect not only the state of Texas, but the planet. But I know our kids and the next generation are just going to do incredible things. So that's really inspiring to see. I'm going to talk a bit about technology today. I'm going to focus on what's available today, what actually exists, what's possible with technology that's accessible to most all in this room. I'm also going to show some examples of that in practice as well. And also days like this are great because I love talking about what we're doing and showing folks what's possible today, but also want to receive that feedback about, okay, it would be better if you used it for this or if you designed your product that way. So I've already had a lot of good discussions here in the breaks and lunch, and welcome more after the session at happy hour. So Agerpoint, we're really focusing on solving some of the data challenges that have been discussed today. So how can we develop tools that can provide spatial data to measure and monitor anything from agriculture, so the new climate smart hybrids and genetics like cotton in West Texas, all the way to some of the regenerative agriculture programs that were discussed from Keurig Dr. Pepper on the last panel, and also to the conservation, restoration, and monitoring programs that have been highlighted today. So we're really focusing on how do we make tools that are accessible, and to do that, one of the tools we have is through a smartphone. So I'll talk a bit about a smartphone and what we built to capture data in the field. And then also, how do we analyze that data and store and manage that data? Another big issue, right? We talked a lot about spreadsheets and Excel, and maybe you've got something on your machine and someone else has something on another. So how do we bring that together and then also supplement it with more data-rich types of information in the future? So smartphone data capture. There's a lot of smartphones. This data is probably a bit old here, but there's 7 billion smartphones in the world. 86% of people have access. We still have to do a better job in some communities to make sure everyone does have access to smartphones. But wow, we're using, we're really adopting these as a planet. So 50% increase over a 5-year period, and it's just going to keep growing. I mean, this is our best way to communicate and interact with the world today. And that's really, I think we sometimes underappreciate, how great the technology has advanced over the last few years in tech, but connectivity, cellular, now satellite connectivity, battery life, it's less frustrating now to get through a day without, having to charge your phone midday. So that's an incredible leap in innovation. Data storage, same thing. We're not clearing off our devices as much as we used to when we're taking a lot of photos of our kids. Location services, they're getting more accurate, more available. AR, augmented reality, how we interact with the environment through smartphones. A lot of great tech now on smartphones using AR that are actually real and not just, for play. Edge processing, so we do a lot of cloud computing as a globe, a lot of computing in the cloud, but increasingly with neural processing units and better chips, we can do a lot of that on our devices. Reduces the actual consumption of carbon to store data and process data. It's a good future for us. AI, and then sensors. So specifically to sensors, I talked about the smartphone. So here's an example of Apple. Over a 5-year period, the phones themselves haven't gotten much bigger. I think we finally figured out we don't need a tablet this size in our pocket, so we've kind of optimized that. But really the form factor that's changed are the sensors that are on it. So the optics have gotten incredible. We had a 12 megapixel camera back in 2017 on the iPhone XS. And in 2020, Apple decided to add a LiDAR sensor, which is really great for companies like us. We can do some cool things with light and LiDAR. And then the camera just got bigger. So in 2022, you started to see 48 megapixel cameras, and even today, there's just incredible amount of tech that's going into the optics on a smartphone. So let's use that to actually collect data. So what do we need to see and hear and map in the field that we can obviously do a lot with satellite data, but how do we supplement that with a device that most everyone in the world has access to? So at our company, we put a lot of design efforts into a consumer type experience for someone to go capture data. So we have apps called an Agerpoint capture app that's available for Android and iOS. And the app actually allows you to go and just scan an area. So you might have a plot of a forested plot that you want to go and scan. You might have some plants that are emerging that you want to count and analyze and check for the health. So that's really what we do on the capture side, and some really cool tech to be able to ingest data. AR tech, you see the middle picture there. There's actually augmented reality feedback while you're capturing. So when you're running through this apple orchard, you actually can see that you've captured data over this part of the row and not this part of the row. And then, customizing, how do you select and optimize all the different sensors and parameters that were talked about in the last slide? How do we simplify that? And like how Allan uses really simple terms, it's not tons, it's units, but we got to make it really easy for folks that we're trying to get data from in the field. And then uploading data, we want to make it where you're not pulling SD cards off and emailing data and we've sent hard drives of data across the country before. So how do we make it as easy as downloading a movie on Amazon Prime or Netflix? Just pick what you've captured and then upload it where it needs to go. So that's the capture process. Once we have all these photos, these videos, these audio files, these comprehensive 3D scans that, by the way, can listen to audio too while you're capturing, and we can transcribe someone describing a field or translate a language that's less common into a more common language. But today we upload that to the cloud. That's when AI, traditional AI, comes in, machine learning. So here you can actually see a cacao shot on the left that is the image that your phone sees, and then adjacent to that, this is what the computer sees, right? So we're able to segment the parts of that plant that are interesting to us. So here it's cacao pods, its leaves, its vegetation, its trunks. And you can also notice that it's not picking up on the leaves that are not part of that specific species. And that's really important, right? Because not every plot of land or forested area is nice and neat with no weeds or no competing vegetation, right? So it's really important that we design algorithms and models that see the things that we want to see without our tired human eyes having to make the assessment. And then, once we figure out what's in these data sets, and then we can bring it all together. And you see this picture of a tree. This is, again, a cacao tree. That's a three-dimensional model. So we've taken all the different machine learning classifications that we've identified, and we put that into 3D. And why that's important, you can start to count things, make sure you're not counting the same thing twice. You can size things, you can run statistics. I can remove the parts of the scene that I don't want to see and only see the objects that I do. For example, I might want to say, show me the disease and show me what percentage of this disease actually affects this whole scene, and give me some percentage of an area or volumetrics. So we're really focusing on this workflow. You can see an example here on the bottom. This is This is actually scanning a more mature forest and then automatically identifying which ones are pine, and then taking DBH measurements so we can use that as input into some other equations. Smartphone data, it helps you measure all these different things: heights, densities, diameters, biomass, plant health, species, inventory, sometimes yield estimation, right? So we can get indications of how the plant's going to produce directly by looking at fruit or other components of the plant. And obviously geolocation as well. So that's all smartphone. Really exciting stuff, really accessible, but we bring this data together with all kinds of other data sources, from drones, from space, from soil sensors, and other types of really exciting IoT startup companies that are able to ingest data in us. So it's really exciting to see all these data sets in one place, and then also look and see how the views of this piece of land, or this farm, or this forest has changed over time, but also get really quantitative measurements and less real subjective and manual measurements. In some cases, measurements that is really difficult, like biomass and volumetrics, are really hard for us to measure, especially if you don't know what you're looking at. You don't have to have a PhD in agronomy or forestry to really use the tools. I want to highlight some other companies in tech doing really great things. So eDNA, you may or may not have heard of eDNA, but there's an exciting company here, Nature Metrics, I wanted to highlight. This is taking a soil sample or a water sample, and actually, just like we can sequence our genome, and you can go use a service like 23andMe, we can kind of do that kind of stuff for our natural environment too. So really rich data that comes back from this, and it seems like the sample process is pretty easy as well from what I'm reading. Bioacoustics, I had some discussions with some folks at launch that are aware of the bioacoustic capabilities, either fixed sensors in the field or through apps like ours that you can actually listen and measure audio. So you can use machine learning that doesn't really know what it's listening to, but can look at a spectrogram, a visual representation of that sound, and you can actually train algorithms to identify the visuals of that. So highlighting the Cornell lab at Merlin, many of you probably know them or have the app on your phone. It's incredible. As part of the morning coffee routine is to sit on the porch and turn on the Merlin app and see what birds are passing up or passing that south. So really cool technology. Satellite analytics, I'll highlight a company called Upstream Lens. So they ingest data from all kinds of sources like Airbus, ESA, Maxar, NASA, Jetty, and others, and create really simple change indicators. When something happens, an anomaly happens, gives you a notification. Then you can use tools like we offer at Agerpoint, ground tools, smartphones to go actually see what happened, and then use that as a feedback loop to train these spaceborne models and make them even better. This is also exciting. You might have seen this. Meta with some other partners actually released for public use 1 meter canopy volume data set of the entire globe. So we got the entire globe within, I don't know, maybe like a couple meters accuracy. We know the canopy height of trees, right? So this is really helpful. It's great to see companies investing. This is very expensive otherwise if you're not getting this for free. So more companies starting to invest in getting data sets that we can use and others can use, and we can all bring this together. There's an organization called Nature Tech Collective. I'd welcome you to go to their website. They highlight all these tech companies. They're constantly monitoring for interesting ideas for conservationists and regenerative ag, all kinds of different technologies around nature. I'll briefly just highlight a quick case study here. So this is some work that we're doing with longleaf pine restoration monitoring in the Francis Marion National Forest near Charleston, South Carolina. So the question was, how can our partners use digital tools to help them improve some of their conservation efforts? Challenges, as many of you know, incredibly labor intensive to conduct inventories of fresh plants and check on the survivability of those plants. You can't monitor everything from satellites, especially when they're really tiny, really less than 5 years. It's hard to see. Documenting other types of elements like biodiversity, and then how do we manage and share data? So we went in earlier this year and said, let's do some smartphone captures, let's get satellite data, drones, let's go do ground truthing, painstakingly taking diameters and heights and inventories and spacing distances for a few different years. So stuff that was planted this year, last year, the year before, and let's see what works. I like this slide because for those that use satellite imagery, each square represents about 15 by 15 meter square, and this shows you from satellite to drones really what the resolution looks like. So all the way from ESA Sentinel, that's 10 meter resolution. Not really great if you're looking at 100 acres. Great if you're looking at maybe 2,000 or larger. You can see some minor changes. Airbus, this is a 0.5 meter per pixel resolution. And the drones, you start to see, it's a little bit more operationally intensive. You have to, fly a drone. You have to have a licensed pilot by the FAA, but you get better data, right? But not everyone has access to a drone. There's also, a lot of drone restrictions to fly, but really good base data set to use. So here's that same drone data, the 45 meter altitude, and this is a three-dimensional model of a rocket stage longleaf pine. So you can see this is something you can interact with, you can measure, you can run analytics on it, but it gives you confidence that that actual rocket stage pine, that's the same pine here that you see in the drone imagery. That's about as best as you could do from the drone imagery. So it gives you more confidence that what's happening in the field, and it really supplements these other types of data sets. So, just to show you some machine learning here, this is like once the pine was planted. These are the actual pine that we're using the phone to see and identify automatically that this is a pine. So we built a model that actually says this is longleaf and it doesn't see any other species. So really good to help the project planning partners to validate what they're doing immediately post-planning without having to send someone to the field. 1 to 3 years, we're still doing a lot of scouting and looking for survivability, and we've got 3D models and images and other inputs from the field scientist. And then when it's more mature, we can start to apply some more analytics to look for actual trunks that can potentially use for carbon and other biodiversity assessments. All this comes together in a platform, so everything that I showed you there, it's all in one spot. You can add anything else. We added the Meta Global Canopy Height data set and others. So really exciting to see all these companies that I'm mentioning and ours and other big tech, partnering together to help provide better data sets. So the tech is here. My message is the tech is actually here, but we need to all work together in uncommon collaborations. We need to share data. We need to implement citizen scientists as well, that we have tools that they have in their pocket that they can help source data from us too, and that really build buy-in as well from the communities. Data standardization, got to have common practices and standardization. And then also data management, right? So I know it's coming. There's this next wave of generative AI and agentic workflows that if we've got a lot of good data in one spot, those models are going to be able to tell us some really interesting things about what's there, give us notifications, help us diagnose and prescribe and predict what's going to happen. But it doesn't work if the spreadsheets are sitting in other parts. We need to figure out how to co-locate that data and share it so we can be prepared for a world where generative AI will really help us do our jobs a lot better. So appreciate the time and look forward to the rest of the day. And feel free to reach out anytime if you want to talk more or demo our products. Happy to give everyone a demo that's here, and yeah, look forward to it. Thanks.
I think I have the wrong apps on my phone. Thank you all for having me. My name is Preston Smith. I'm the managing partner of Wildwood Environmental Credit Company. When Joni asked me to speak on generating change, I said yes. And then I realized what a daunting topic I agreed to speak on. The reality is, Karina just said it, change before you have to. When I thought about this, I looked back in history. Market hunting drove many species to the brink of extinction, but it also created fish and game agencies that started regulating those species. The Texas Forestry Association came into existence in the early 20s with the idea of best standards, management practices to avoid regulation. And then the NRCS came into existence to help landowners think about agriculture and conservation in unison. And that really continued all the way into the 60s and 70s through legislation. The Clean Water Act, the Endangered Species Act, they created the framework for what we talk about, or what I talk about, is compensatory restoration. that is required, regulated. And I can't stand in this room, in this building, and not talk about the Bush legacy here. It was George H.W. Bush that it was instrumental in legislating the no net loss policy for aquatic resources in this country. And then under George W. Bush, the new rule of mitigation came into existence, which really inspired entrepreneurs like me to enter this market. So I'm forever indebted to the Bush family for that. So when I talk about mitigation, what am I talking about? Probably a good question. The Clean Water Act says if we're going to have natural resource impacts, first, we don't want you to. The easiest way to mitigate it is to avoid it, not to have it in the first place. If it's not practicable to avoid it, how can we locate our project in a way that minimizes those impacts? What we can't avoid and minimize, then we want to see you mitigate. Replace those ecological functions in kind and in good time. And that's the work that Wildwood does. We are a mitigation banking company. We go out and identify sites, land with appropriate resources in volumes that need restoration. We take it through an entitlement process, an unfortunately lengthy entitlement process, anywhere from 36 to 60 months on average in Texas, to go through interagency review with state and federal agencies. Once we get that approval, then the fun starts. We put our projects under a permanent conservation easement, and then we begin the restoration efforts. The physical act of building streams, restoring wetlands, planting trees, treating invasives. And as part of this plan, we also have to have risk reduction mechanisms in place. How do we know this conservation is going to work? Short term, we actually bond our restoration. So we know the cost of this construction, this restoration effort, and we have to put a letter of credit or a bond in place to ensure that work gets done. Then we know at some point the credits will be sold and they'll be out. So we have to establish long-term stewardship endowments to fund conservation in perpetuity. So we have great risk reduction mechanisms ensuring the durability of that conservation. Why do we do this? For environmental credits. We actually generate credits onto a ledger that we can sell. And we sell those to offset unavoidable adverse impacts to like-kind resources. So we only get to sell them once. They're restricted to watershed and ecoregions, very similar to where we're restoring these resources. They allow permittees to move through that process quicker, and it also allows them to divest of that environmental liability. So they are no longer tasked with environmental restoration. That comes to our organization and our projects. And this allows Wildwood to invest not only in a return in conservation, but a return in investment. How do we know they're good? Well, I would say you could look at this picture and you could qualify that we have radically transformed that landscape. But really, what we're doing is we're quantitatively measuring success. We start with a baseline report looking at a host of things, everything from fish and macroinvertebrate communities, the tree species, stream stability. This is actually one of my favorite graphs. This is 2 years pre-construction, during construction, and post-construction groundwater monitoring wells. This is where we actually saw a physical response in the water table due to the restoration work we were doing. And then you also see it in the soils. The hydraulic response expanded the wetlands and made for more robust wildlife habitat, cleaner water, cleaner air. And now that we're all experts in mitigation banking, how do we take this and look forward? Karina said it, change before you have to. I think it's rooms like this, summits like this, where we can have conversations about how to drive our own future, how to set up our own systems that work very efficiently. I think one of the things that we've lacked in this market is rewarding the private landowner. How do we put economic incentives on conservation that battle subdivision development? Not that those things are bad, but we should have a cost for these ecological systems. And I'm going to use a technical term here. When it comes to the voluntary markets, they've been very squishy. Carbon sequestration is kind of a learning as you go process. Sustainable forestry, agriculture, we've been learning as we go. Biodiversity, I still don't know what that really means. But there is a market there, and if we can put the right incentives in place, I think we can dramatically alter the landscape of conservation. So for businesses, I'd take the mitigation hierarchy, and I've already heard this a lot today, and I think it's really impressive when we talk about reduction, reuse, recycle. That is a great way to avoid and minimize. But is there something to offset? Does that strategy work for your company? If it does, signal to the market that you're prepared to buy offsets. Let those conservation providers go into the market and create the mechanisms that you need, be it water, be it carbon, be it wetlands or endangered species. Conservation providers. I firmly believe that conservation, successful conservation, good conservation, should be objective. We need minimum standards and guardrails, or it becomes a race to the bottom. Who can do it the cheapest? And when it's done the cheapest, it's not always the best for the resource. So these are some of the universal principles that we've relied on in our industry in thinking about conservation. Is it durable? Will it last? Do we have science-based success criteria that we can hang our hat on to be proven and known? And what risk reduction mechanisms can we put in place? And I think a lot of what we've talked about here today in this panel is data. How can we look at this and quantify the success of this conservation? And I think that's one of the things that we really should be thinking about as we're putting conservation on the ground. Last but not least, I think this is something for everyone, and I wish I could take full credit for this graph, but the Government Accountability Office just published this report earlier this month looking at the cost of compensatory mitigation across the country. And this was a breakdown of the cost involved to generate a credit. Land, design and approval, that entitlement process, site work, restoration. Are we planting trees? Are we building streams? What kind of work is going on? And then the maintenance and monitoring. We can't just set these conservation projects into place and then forget about them. We have to continually manage and monitor them. And then long-term stewardship, 5, 7, 10 years past monitoring, what's going on at the site? Are we treating invasives? Are we still monitoring trespass issues? Is it becoming an urbanized environment? Do we have other things to be thinking about? All of those elements need to be considered when putting conservation on the ground. And I think we need to be transparent about it. For purchasers of environmental offsets as well as developers, this creates a known cost and a full cost of accounting for conservation. Joni asked us earlier why we are here. I'm here because I believe in the market system. I believe conservation can benefit from that free flow of exchange of ideas and commodities. And maybe it sounds evil to talk about commoditizing the environment, but if we don't put a value on these ecosystems, what does it mean to avoid or minimize? There's no reason. You can go and you can impact, and it doesn't matter. There needs to be a cost and a deterrent, but change before you have to. I think this room has the opportunity, the corporations here that are thinking about this, you get to drive that change. You get to set up the market the way you want it to be set up. And I think that's an exciting time for all of us. Thank you.
That was so cool. All right, so we've got 20 minutes for questions. You can submit them virtually too on the YouTube stream. But I'll get started with the first one because it kind of plays into what you were just talking about, Preston. And we'll start with you and then Kevin and then Allan. What is the biggest barrier that you're seeing towards articulating the value of nature-based solutions and conservation projects? And what do you think is the best way to message that value?
Well, fortunately, it was kind of in my last slide. I think the idea of conservation comes across as an easy, tangible solution. But the reality is that there's a lot to unpack. It's not just the land, it's not just the work, but there's considerations for the data collection, baseline, annual monitoring, back to that quantitatively measuring success. And that's a hard thing to articulate. We think about it as trees and water and wetlands and carbon, but really it's a full suite of products. And how do you think about that all working together?
Similarly, I think it's how we articulate value to, say, farmers that are trying to understand what regenerative agriculture is, or carbon markets or biodiversity markets. we have to communicate in a way that's actually makes sense to a farmer. So it's not regenerative ag, it's fertilizer management, it's soil management, it's optimizing yield, it's mitigating disease risk, right? It's planning for resilience of storms and events that come through. So those that are responsible for enacting the change know how to communicate in those terms. So we have to meet them with that same terminology as well.
I think the first step for my community is finding the common connection to the bay. And for me, it's frequently fishing. Most of the people who live on the coast are fishermen. So if you can articulate how the change is making this fishing spot better or worse, you get an inside track. If it's not fishing, maybe it's birding or it's dolphin watching. But you got to find the connection that person has to the bay, and because you probably have it too, and then talk about that to get them connected.
Great. All right. Any questions in the audience? Right up there.
This is largely for Kevin and Preston, but you can all answer. How are you capturing the human element or the community element? Or are you? And if not, how could we capture that in data?
Great question. So one of the more interesting things that I've seen relative to the mitigation banking industry is there are a lot of industries right now that have become less in vogue, coal being a great example. And we've actually put a lot of teams from previous coal mines to work doing conservation restoration projects where we actually need big yellow equipment, thanks Holt, to come out there and move dirt and restore ecosystems. And so that's one thing, but then the reality is when you talk about a permanent conservation easement, you're creating green space in forever. And so we're really impacting communities in proximity to a lot of these projects by creating better water downstream, cleaner air in the vicinity, and permanent green space.
And just to add, so some of the data that needs to be captured, it's either, I'd say it's on two extremes. So one, you're asking someone in a community to fill out a spreadsheet, and then you just kind of look away and hope it's all right and don't audit it, right? And on the other extreme, you send a very expensive resource, maybe on a plane, train, or car, to a site that is not part of the community, maybe has really important skills and expensive tools and sensors to go and do the monitoring or baselining of that project. So how can we get the communities involved, understanding why we're measuring what we're measuring, and then how to actually use tools that are accessible and able to be interpreted by them. And in some cases, it might be the grower, the landowner, or someone in the community that, it's not to reference Uber as a model, but it created a lot of jobs, for better, for worse. People had jobs, and so, if there can be a job that can be helping to monitor, whether you're kind of a digital agronomist or a conservation champion, how can we create jobs for people that are in that system that can then stay there and then evangelize it outside. We heard a lot of good examples earlier today around the PEEP program that it's great. You're helping to create solve a problem, creating curriculum for folks that can't afford to or don't have the time to create their own curriculum. So how can we do something similarly to help those communities create just flywheels in there using digital tools is what we're really interested in.
Got a question here in the front.
Kevin, I was fascinated by your new tool set.
Thanks.
I spend a lot of time on the Trinity River, and I see a lot of code violations, and I talk to law enforcement, and they say, we just don't have the resources to find who's filling in the floodplain, who's building illegally, who's building filled dirt. And I just wonder, is this a tool for code enforcement and to help with people that are breaking the law with regard to environmental laws? And another application might be to identify invasive species that are taking water out of the Rio Grande and calculating how much water that would save us if we eliminated the willows and so forth. That just Is government one of your best customers for this type of thing?
See, this is what I love. I love to see the wheels turning and all these ideas coming up. We haven't focused a lot on the government, but we are starting to have some conversations with like the USDA and others that are interested in how do we crowdsource better data, all right? But yeah, same approach for the government. I think a really great near-term use case is for folks that are protecting large areas of land. Or I like to hike the Appalachian Trail, and so there's all these different communities up the trail that really protect, like, say, 10 miles or 20 miles, and they want better data too from, say, hikers or others that are in the community. So great model for them. How do we, again, use something you can't see from space a lot of times on a trail and help to crowdsource that? And not to mention the threat of auditability, but if there is that threat around, like if cameras are around the city, right, it might change your behavior, right? So if we know that there's people that have access to kind of report violations quickly, maybe that actually helps deter some of the bad habits as well. But absolutely, I think there's a lot of potential for those applications with this type of technology.
Thanks to Jody and to Ms. Bush for this great day today, especially for Kevin and Preston. I was in Canada last week for a global congress of the International Land Conservation Network with 300 other conservationists from all six continents. And as I listen to you today, it reminds me that watersheds and migratory flyways do not understand or recognize international borders. They cross those borders. So what can we do to use your technology and environmental credits to address international problems? Because as Allan said earlier, a lot of the water that comes down toward your bay also moves on to the Gulf of Mexico and further south from there. These are international problems that start locally. So how can we address this from the local to the global? Because we're dealing with global issues that start locally.
Right on. So one area is you find organizations that don't care about the borders that can go and seek data and provide evidence that can then be brought to folks that maybe don't want to play across borders, right? So I think one is just, how do you know this is true, right? Well, we need to be able to answer this and to show them without a shadow of a doubt, this is the problem, these are the problems, and it's not anecdotal, but it's quantified. So how can we use technology to help with that and then get it to the right place and then advocate for change, right?
No, I think that's a great point. When we talk about regulated markets, it's the rigidity that causes problems. In the voluntary market, you don't have that rigidity. And so I think there's opportunities to look at setting up systems around conservation and offsets that can address that border issue, whether it be between states, which we see in the regulated community now, or between countries.
Yeah, and then here locally in the U.S., we should use our advantage of the federal system in some parts to help the states play nicely together, and then broaden up beyond our borders too. But there's definitely opportunity for us to do a better job between states. A couple weeks ago, I was in Florida for a similar type of conference around longleaf pine, and same issues. Pine still grows into Alabama, right? But then there's completely different regulations and funding and practices, and it's not great for the ecosystem.
Hi, guys. Thanks, y'all, so much. This is great. Allan, I'm also a Bay Rat. I appreciate that. But my question actually is for Kevin. I'm with the National Forest Foundation. I know there's a few other folks here from forestry. And would love to hear, this is an incredible tool, would love to understand a little bit more about wildfire mitigation and how you're either seeing it currently working, potentially working, and what that could look like.
Great to see you from the National Forest Foundation doing great work. We haven't done a lot of work in wildfire risk mitigation, but same principles apply. What are you trying to measure? For what reason? How are you actually going to get resources to go and make those measurements? And then how can we either supplement or replace it with digital tools? I know there's some methodologies that are written, mostly for the West Coast, and as you get to Colorado and more west, around continually monitoring, so setting up specific plots, literally humans walking around and pen and paper and saying this is how much timber's down, how much is alive and dead, and what it is. So one thing is replacing that digitally, but also if we're there capturing data, who else can benefit from using that data? I know there's a lot of ecologists that would love to see it, right, to see what species are there, flora and fauna. So I think there's ample opportunity to use these type of capabilities for wildfire risk. And I focus on a lot of the ground scanning technologies as well, because we really major in that. But combining that with these other great sources of data from satellites and drones and planes, whatever else that we have, I think that's important too, that we all work together and bring these to a common place.
Okay, I'll ask another one. So I just joined a company that's moving from Edmonton down to the DFW area to make tree balls that we're going to use to plant trees around the world. We have a 1 billion tree project, so we'll be calling you to be able to track those. But one of the things that I'm finding is that the market for carbon credits, even though we know like one credit is worth a ton of carbon taken out of the atmosphere, there's no market. There's no like established market. It's not, you can't trade these, even though you could trade them. There is no market currently. What do you guys see, especially from the water side of it, the mitigation side, that's more established that could be applied to the carbon side as well?
So my experience in the carbon markets has been limited, mostly because it's still voluntary. And so it's a process that we see take 2 steps forward and then 2 steps back, and then 1 step forward and then 1 step back. And so it's a learning as you go. There are a number of challenges associated with the carbon market, in my opinion. I think you're looking at a variety of best management practices, depending on where you are, regionality, globally. And that makes it hard to put on guardrails around the market. What am I really buying? And we saw a big retraction in the carbon market this past year because the concept of greenwashing. Hey, I bought all these carbon credits from something that turned out to be not what I thought it was. And that's where I think, again, the right minimum standards from a conservation provider standpoint, and then understanding how to put guardrails on it from a procurement side is also very important. Ooh, that's a loaded question. I believe in the free market, and I think the more regulation you see, the harder it can be to operate in that market. I can speak from that experience. We are permitting large-scale restoration projects that may take 5 years. It only takes between 60 and 90 days to get a permit to impact the environment. I think that's backwards. So I think there's a place for regulation to put guardrails on things, but I still believe in the free market and the ability to go put these projects in the ground more efficiently.
Are you going to be dropping tree balls from a drone, or are you going to do this in the ground?
However you want to do it.
Yeah. Sometimes they bounce, so I would prefer in the ground, but we can talk more about that.
This is a question for Kevin. You mentioned that the language with agriculture, with farmers, used a term, like in certain communities, there is a resistance to, say, regenerative farming. And I wondered if you could say, it sounds like you've had some experience with that. I come from a family of small town farmers in southeast Missouri, even though I grew up in Dallas, and there's a real difference in the way that we talk about things, even though we're talking about the same things. So I'm just asking, can you speak to that farming language thing and your experience within that, given your work?
Yeah, farmers they don't want to, they have a great BS filter, right? So they've been, sold a bunch of baloney many times over, whether it's a tech product, a robot, or whatever, right? So for one, if you don't know their language, then the trust is not there anyway, right? So there has to be and also, if you don't know what their problems are and you're trying to go help them change how they're going to act, it's, what are you even doing, right? So, and a lot of regenerative ag programs are asking, say, a farmer to make an investment today that's not going to see a return next year, likely, maybe not year 2, potentially year 3, but in the long term, it is better, right? But, you can't, it's a lot of risk, right? You're basically asking someone like, hey, everyone in this room, let's take less salary this year, but it's going to be better for you in the company 2 years later. We'll promise you we're going to pay you more money, right, in 2027. Deal? Maybe not, right? That's the same thing we're asking farmers to do. So outside of like communicating and making it real and tangible and the benefits that's going to have to soil and crops and outputs, nutrition, and their soil is going to still be. We've had problem. We've gone through this 100 years or less ago, and the Dust Bowl and everything, and like we know that we have to protect our soils, but we can't just communicate in a way that doesn't make sense to the grower. And then the last thing here is that corporations, there's some bigger corporations in here that are wanting to implement regenerative agriculture programs. Someone's going to have to pay the price to get through these first couple of years, right? So if I want my farmers to do no-till, low-till, or use some type of monitoring program, will come out of pocket, right? We saw some really good examples of this a few weeks ago in New York Climate Week of some companies that are coming up, and we can talk, afterwards about that. Some may not be public, but yeah, someone's going to have to pay for the transition, and I think those that do are going to see the best financial returns in the long run.
All right. So we've got one more. Joni, do you want to ask?
Yeah, so my question is for Allan, and I want to start out with kudos for you and all of your volunteer team for the amazing progress you've made with volunteers and no staff. It's really incredible. But I wonder if you could share, with all of the learnings that you guys have had in working together, if someone else was wanting to take care of a different bay or a different ecosystem and starting a similar volunteer type activity, what would you do differently? I know you said talk and connect with people at where they are, but if you could think of like, how would you have started differently to ramp to achieve the similar success that you guys have?
I think when I started doing this, my assumption was that everybody thought like me. And so it takes a learning to kind of get to know your community. So I would say you just know your volunteers sooner than what we figured out to do. It took us a while to get ramped up. It's amazing. We had very productive volunteers on our crab traps and our trash. But all of a sudden, when we advertised for turtles, they came out of the net. They came out of the woods. So you got to find the connection with people. What connects them to the bay, and that we didn't do that. I don't think soon enough.
Thank you for your questions and your engagement in the final panel, Generating Change. And thank you especially to Allan, Kevin, and Preston for sharing today. We can give it up for them.
I was an agriculturalist, trying to get all I could for the land. But since that time, I've realized that this land is not just a resource to be used and abused.
Well, speaking of technology, yeah. So we'll go ahead and wrap up, and we have two things: one, a wrap up, and then the announcement of our Texan by Nature 20. But what a day so far! I just want to thank each and every one of you for being here, but thank you in particular to all of our speakers. Your expertise, your candor, the time you took in talking to us beforehand, and the preparation. We really appreciate it. We appreciate you being vulnerable and giving insights, and just thank you very much. Also want to thank our sponsors and our partners for being here today, and of course the Texan by Nature team. It's, as I mentioned earlier, a privilege to work with you each day. So hopefully at this point you are close to fulfilling why you came here today. And you're like, yep, I knew why I came, and I'm right there. Hopefully you're also thinking about how you can apply the learnings from these discussions or the conversations that you had, the people that you've met, how you can apply those when you go back to your own organizations. If you're wondering how to get involved, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention a few ways so that you can get involved. If you're a conservation organization and you're not part of our Conservation Partner Program already, that is a free program. It's a service to you. Orvi Donnie is here. She manages that program, and please reach out. We'd love to, she's right up there. We'd love to get you involved as a conservation partner. Conservation Wrangler, you heard from some of our Conservation Wrangler projects today. Those applications are open and they will close at the end of January. That is our accelerator program. If you are an industry member or a conservation group, you can get involved with the Texas Water Action Collaborative. You've heard that mentioned a couple of times today. If you're looking for funding for your project, or you're looking for projects to fund, or to learn more about what's going on with water in Texas, the Water Action Collaborative is a great place to start. If you're looking for recognition, Texan by Nature 20, which you'll learn more about shortly, or just getting involved through our certification program. So whether you're looking for new partners, projects, opportunities, there are any number of ways that you can get involved. So at Texan by Nature, we envision a future where every single Texan, every single business is engaged in conservation, every single person. As exemplified today, we believe in science and data-based approaches. We believe in action. We believe in reporting results and building on data. We believe in building on what's working. We believe in removing barriers so that we can work together towards a future that is vibrant for all of us. We believe that each and every person is Texan by nature. And in this room, we are each leaders in our respective fields, in our respective industries, and we each have an opportunity today to start something new or to change course with the things that we can impact. We believe, as I mentioned earlier, that collectively we can reach $10 billion for conservation in a single year. And we can realize the value that that investment yields. I believe that we heard many keys and themes here today from our speakers, and I always like to jot down my takeaways throughout the day, and these are shortened, but I want to run through a couple of them that were really trends that we heard from multiple speakers, and that's start locally, listen, listen, listen. As they say, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Like that was a theme, I think, from every single speaker. Listen, take a holistic approach, and be thoughtful about your data analysis. It's great that you have data, but think about how you're interpreting that, because that's just as important as you feed it back in. Make it simple. We heard that in variations over and over today. Make it simple, make it rewarding, and make it a connection. Invest in time and people. Learn, 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 learn. Learn outside the scope of your own job. Ask a lot of questions. Be curious, and make a commitment. It's not going to happen in a day, it may not happen in a year, may not happen in 3 years. This is a journey, and it's making a commitment to durability such that we're making a change and progressing as we move along. So I started the day and asked, why are you here? Was it new connections? Was it funding, new opportunities, learning, inspiration? Your boss made you come? I didn't really say that one, but as you think about, is that fulfilled? I hope you're thinking about how you'll take today and that reason for attending, whatever it was, and maybe it morphed throughout the day as you talked to people and you met them. But I hope you'll take it back and act on it. Because I'm excited about the future. I hope that you are as well. We're at a point in time, and especially with this last panel where we talked about the history of some of the conservation initiatives and where we are with technology that's very different. We're at this point in time where knowledge and technology and interest and need are coming together to create new and vast opportunity. We have a bold goal in front of us of investment, but we have one of vast collaboration where each of us are working together. We have a goal of action, future-changing action. We are so excited to do this with you. Thank you for being here. Just thank you. And so, Texan by Nature 20. Super excited to recognize these companies. Some of you are very familiar with this. At this time, we're actually going to end streaming because this won't be announced until tomorrow. So if we could end the live streaming, that would be great. Thank you to everyone who joined us online. We are looking forward to continuing that conversation. So I'm always honored to end the day with celebration and announcement of the Texan by Nature 20. For those who don't know, the Texan by Nature 20 recognizes the best conservation coming from industry in Texas. Each year we announce 20 businesses across 12 industries who are doing progressive and incredible work. Each year we have an esteemed selection committee of top industry leaders. Some of you are in this room. If you all want to wave, thank you very much for taking place in that selection committee each year. But basically we start research, we'll start next week, and we research and pull together information on about 2,000 companies. We narrow that down to 60, and then the selection committee that represents all industries in Texas chooses this top 20. And I'd like to thank this year Jetco, Holtcat, and Marathon Petroleum for underwriting our work and making the Texan by Nature 20 possible. It's an honor and delight to once again share the stage with Kyle Christianik. He is the president of Jetco Delivery, and he is going to help out with the Texan by Nature 20 announcement.
Thank you, Joni. Thank you, Mrs. Bush. It's an honor and a pleasure to be a small part of this. And to all the speakers today, just phenomenal information. To all the honorees we're about to announce, congratulations to you all. But I tell you what is amazing, and one of the things that really drew me to this organization is that in this day and age, it's kind of it's a breath of fresh air that no one in here cares whether I'm a Republican or Democrat. We're all in here together. And it's just passionate people who are committed to taking care of our environment. I mean, that shouldn't be political. So it's really an honor to you, Joni, your leadership, and obviously Mrs. Bush. So since 1976, Jetco has partnered to provide intermodal drayage, open deck, heavy haul, dry van, asset-backed freight brokerage, and warehousing services. We're based out of Houston, but we're all over the state and all over the Gulf Coast, really. But Jetco's more than just transportation, logistics, and delivery. We're a family who believes in community and believes in working together for progress. We launched Drive to Conservation last year with the intent to support the future conservation and recognize the models and work coming from our partners. Essentially, for every load of freight we move, we donate to Texan by Nature. So the more loads we move, the more money we're giving to the organization. So it's been a really neat deal that the team and I have come together on. It's just been a great partnership so far. This year's Texan by Nature 20 honorees are certainly examples and models to follow. And with that, I will now share this year's Texan by Nature 20. If you're an honoree, please make your way to the stage, and we're going to line up this direction. Some of y'all, we've done this before. If you can, I know this is hard, but try to hold your applause to the end, and we'll have a big applause at the end. So with that, starting out, number 1, Acme Brick. And again, come on down to the stage. I said we're going to try, but that's okay. CMEX. There she is. Cirrus Logic. City. City of San Antonio, Office of Sustainability. Yeah, you can just come all the way down and form a line right here. Darling Ingredients. Dallas Fort Worth International Airport. Farmer Brothers, GM, HEB. Who doesn't love HEB, right? Holt Cat, IBM, Marathon Petroleum. We may have to make 2 lines, it looks like. Mary Kay. I won't bite, come on. North American Development Bank. Overland Partners. Texas Health Resources. WM. WSP. And last but not least, Excel Energy. Please join me in congratulating and thanking these leaders for their vision and leadership in conservation and sustainability.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much. We're going to take a picture, so if you guys would stay, and everyone else, please join us out for networking and cocktails and appetizers. So thank you again for being here, everyone. Will it move?